So today we're here to talk about enterprise mode for Internet Explorer 11. It's an exciting feature providing backward compatibility for Internet Explorer 8 and other older versions of Internet Explorer. I'm Fred Pullen. I'm on the Internet Explorer product management team, and with me is Nicole Birdie.
Hi, everyone.
All right, with an audience this small, I do want to keep it as interactive as we can. We're happy to take your questions, but please also keep in mind that it is being streamed and recorded. So if you do have questions, if you ask them out, we can repeat them back for the sake of the people listening, or you can just grab a microphone and ask. So we do want to keep this informal, we do want to keep it casual, but we also want to be respectful of everybody's time and make sure that everyone can hear the questions. Let's go ahead and get started now. So there's a problem today in the ecosystem, and that's browser fragmentation. We know that there is a large number of Internet Explorer 8 out there. If you go by net market share stats, for example, netmarketshare.com is provided by Net Applications, and it goes by unique user agents, or unique users, rather. So in looking at unique users, across the internet, Internet Explorer 8 has over 22% of the desktop market share. Now, this is a browser we introduced over 5 years ago. So this is a problem we have collectively, and we've been looking into how we can solve this, how we can move customers to the latest version. Now, you'll see moving from 10 to 11, you see how the market share moved from 10 to 11 across that time period? That's primarily coming from Windows Update. So that's when Microsoft is pushing out the updates to customers who are accepting that update. But there are some problems in drilling into IE8 specifically, and that's that many of our enterprise customers have standardized on IE8, and I'll talk about why in a minute. There's also a large percentage of IE8 coming from Windows XP because IE8 was the last version of Internet Explorer available on Windows XP. Obviously, we're doing something about that. You may have seen some of the other announcements we've made this month about Internet Explorer and Windows XP. There are some markets where XP is still being used, but obviously we're trying to do something about that and to improve that problem. For enterprise customers specifically, though, we know we can do something about this problem, which is why we are really happy to talk about Internet Explorer 11 with enterprise mode. Now, drilling into the problem, we talked to a lot of enterprise customers about this. And what we found was there's a natural tension today between the old and the new. On the one hand, modern websites require modern standards like HTML5, CSS3, and there are lots of sites like not just Office 365, but frankly even Gmail has an N-1 policy of only supporting the latest couple of browsers. Public-facing websites and services don't want to support every browser ever written. It makes sense. You guys don't want to have to support IE8. I get it. But at the same time, many of these enterprise customers also have a dependency on Internet Explorer 8 for the old stuff. Internet Explorer 8 was a version that they standardized, and I'll talk about that more in a second, but many of the large legacy line of business applications like ERP systems and CRM systems have a multi-year life cycle. So they may have 3, 4, 5, 6-year life cycle. They're not ready to update those applications to modern standards overnight. So in talking with these enterprise customers, what we found was their needs are on both sides of the fence. On the legacy side, they absolutely want to extend their application investments in these large legacy line of business applications. At the same time, they want to make it, they want us to help them make it easier to upgrade to the latest browser, reduce their testing costs, reduce their app compat costs, make it easier to manage and deploy the browser. And obviously, on the modern compatibility side, there's a lot of goodness in terms of modern web standards, better reliability, better performance, even better security. Now, there's a reason why many customers have standardized on IE8, and I'll just walk through this just briefly. Looking at IE6 to IE11, Windows XP supported IE6, 7, and 8. Vista was on 7, 8, and 9. Windows 7 is supported on IE8 and up. And obviously, we have Windows 8 with Internet Explorer 10, Windows 8.1 with Internet Explorer 11. But the sweet spot for a lot of our customers was Internet Explorer 8 because it was the only version of Internet Explorer that was supported on both XP and on Windows 7. So by standardizing on IE8, they didn't have to worry about web app migration. They still had to worry about x86 binary migration, but Microsoft has done a lot towards improving that and making that situation a lot better in the last few years. But by standardizing on IE8, they could ease their migration up to Windows 7. Well, now they're feeling this tension of modern versus old, and they're looking at Windows 8.1 and evaluating that, and many of these companies are finding that Internet Explorer 8 is essentially a blocker for upgrading to Windows 8.1 because they need to be able to upgrade Internet Explorer 11 to get on the modern platform. And by the way, this opens up all kinds of other technologies as well, not just Windows 8.1, but other software, other services, other devices. Services like Office 365 obviously run much better on a modern browser. Even devices like the Surface Pro 2 use Windows 8.1. So it really opens up the next generation of technology for these customers. So the problem we looked at specifically was how do we help these customers move from IE8 up to IE11 and break that dependency? This is why we're happy to announce this week Enterprise Mode for Internet Explorer 11. It provides better IE8 compatibility, tools to manage exactly which websites and web apps use that. So it's not something that's applied to the internet at large. If you're a web developer creating websites, you don't have to worry about Enterprise Mode hitting your website. This is something that generally is going to be configured by IT on a site-by-site, app-by-app basis. So you don't have to worry about testing your public-facing websites against yet another document mode from Microsoft. That's not our intent. It's a very scoped problem, and that's why we have a very scoped solution. All right, Nicole?
Hey, thanks, Fred. So before I jump right into the meat of my talk, I just want to get a sense for who's in the audience. So raise your hand if you do enterprise web development. Raise your hand if you have to take into account IE8 or older. How many of you are tired of taking into account IE8 or older? Yeah, that's a good reason why we did this feature, is that we'd heard loud and clear from web developers saying, you know what I hate? Supporting IE8. You know what I have to do for my job? Support IE8. And it's not just you guys, it's also enterprise IT as well. They're like, you know, it would be great if I didn't have to worry about this website falling on its face every time I wanted to upgrade my browser. So we went, and as Fred mentioned, we got together a group of pilot customers and worked closely with them during the development of Enterprise Mode, because it's easy for us to sit in Redmond and say, you know, I hear there's this problem. Let me get out my crystal ball and I'll divine some answers as to what customers need. And that won't really get us anything that customers want. So we went to our guys in the field, we went to our enterprise customers and said, hey, we know there's this problem, we think we know what can help, and we worked with them during the development of Enterprise Mode. As soon as we had a prototype that would not fall on its face, we gave it to our pilot customers and said, try this out, it's not done yet. Let us know if it's starting to help your needs, if there's anything else you need us to add, if there's anything that's not working. And after several iterations, we have what we are releasing, or what we announced this week as Enterprise Mode. So this is all great, but one thing we haven't talked about yet is what exactly is Enterprise Mode, because this is kind of what this talk's about. So let me answer the question, what's in the box? A lot of older line of business apps do UA string sniffing. And I know it's like not good web practices to do UA string sniffing, but a lot of these web apps were written oftentimes for IE6, and then were ported up to IE8 during some past either OS upgrade or browser upgrade, and they had some special cases, and the browser string sniffing was still useful because when the app was originally written, it wasn't IE6 versus IE7 versus IE8. It was IE6 or Firefox. And at that time, standards weren't as big of a thing. And so we needed to know what browser it was so we could know whether or not our website would work or not. But these websites are still useful today when everybody's moving towards feature detection rather than string sniffing. So in Enterprise Mode, we lie to the website and we send the IE8 user agent string. We know that ActiveX controls are often used, and one of these things that older ActiveX controls do is they ask for browser versions, for the same reason as the older line of business apps, and we send them the IE8 information because we know these ActiveX controls are going to run in IE11, and we say, oh yeah, your browser version checks, Totally passes, it's fine. And you'd think that there might be some problems, but our enterprise customers in the pilot group are like, our ActiveX controls just work. This is really awesome. We don't have to test them extensively, like put it in enterprise mode and it's fine, which I think is very encouraging. We also took a look at some of the deprecated functionality that we deprecated since IE8 timeframe, and we brought some of it back because we saw that line of business apps were using it. And we're like, well, they're using it. We took it out. Like, we took away their cheese. We're going to give it back to them, but only for enterprise mode to kind of scope down some of the deprecated functionality. Additionally, we also turned off some of the new functionality, such as caching and pre-caching or pre-render. If you don't know what pre-render is, imagine if you go to Bing and you do a search. We're going to guess that you are going to click on the first link in the search result, because generally that's the most relevant one, because the search engine did its job properly. And in the background, we will create a virtual tab and render that content in the virtual tab, so that when the user clicks on that link, they get a really nice load experience as we just switch out the virtual tab. Now, the problem is, in the enterprise environment, is enterprises like having toolbars, and the toolbars start to freak out when their tab goes away. Because with the virtual tab switching, we destroy the old tab and bring in the virtual tab. So we disable pre-render in enterprise mode.
We should also mention, just to be clear, this is IE11 emulating IE8. We're not running the IE8 binaries. We're not running the JavaScript engine or other things from IE8. This is IE11 running as IE11 running as IE8 using configuration and code changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. No. Thanks for bringing that up, Fred. But just to go on, like, one of the reasons we get this question a lot is, well, why don't we just give us the IE8 binaries? And the reason is that we've made so many improvements to privacy and security in IE11, or even just since IE8, that it would almost be a shame to not offer that to our enterprise customers. And it turns out through the pilot group, they don't really need the full functionality of the binary. The work we did in enterprise mode, in many cases, is enough to solve their problems.
I have to give full credit to engineering here, because they went through thousands of changes from IE8 to 9 to 10 to 11, as well as thousands of application compatibility bug reports. And they found that there were clusters of issues. So these represent the top issues. Internet Explorer 11 running in enterprise mode is not perfect emulation for IE8. There's obviously a long tail of things that IE8 provided, but these are the top issues that customers ran into. And in the pilot, we found that by and large, these solved many of the issues that customers threw at it.
Yeah, we took the Pareto principle when it approached to developing. You probably don't know the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. You spend 80% or most of your work solving 80% of the case. We would rather solve 80% of the cases 100% of the way than solve 100% of the cases only kind of, sort of, maybe, because with compatibility, that's no good. That's not enough to just solve it 80% of the way. You have to solve it 100% of the way, or otherwise 80% fixed is still 20% broken.
And just one more thing. We had some good questions from the blog post that we made on Wednesday about this, and I wanted to address one thing in particular. We're not taking the document modes away by introducing this feature. You have all of the existing compatibility tools in IE11. We're simply adding another tool to your toolbox. Enterprise mode provides better compatibility for IE8, and we'll talk more about how that works and give you some more details. But we're not taking away the existing document modes. We're not taking away your compatibility view. We're not taking away the compatibility view list. We're not taking away XUA compatible meta tags. So you still have all the tools that you had before. And Nicole mentioned 80-20. Chris Jackson, who's in consulting services, otherwise known as the App Compat guy, says that with the existing application compatibility tools, he can generally get customers up to about 95% compatibility. Enterprise mode is meant to solve that last 5%, at least 80% of that. So if you think about it, we're actually getting up to close to 100% compatibility, 98, 99%. And unfortunately, for many customers who had standardized on IE8, that last few applications were the big ones. It was the ones they were using to run their business, their accounting system, or their CRM system. I talked to one customer, for example, who said they had 3,000 web apps. Most of them worked fine in compatibility view. They knew of 13 or 14 that needed enterprise mode. So it was a very scoped problem. It was a very specific problem. But those 13 or 14 apps were preventing them from even testing Windows 8.1.
Yeah, and just to go, oh, actually, no, Fred, you covered all of that. Thanks. All right, so having this mode is great, but you also need the tools in order to manage it. And we provide that through easy-to-use group policy and registry keys, or registry keys. The first one just controls whether or not enterprise mode is available in the browser to the end user. It's the enable key under the path there on the screen. And what that does is it shows an option in the tools menu that says enterprise mode, and selecting enterprise mode from the dropdown will reload the page in enterprise mode. And the nice thing about this is we also remember when a user loads a page in enterprise mode so that the next time they visit that site, they don't have to put it in enterprise mode again. We remember it automatically, and if it turns out later it doesn't work, they can just uncheck the box and it's fine. Now, the nice thing about the enable key is that it can also be extended, where IT, when they push out this registry key, can also specify a URL and port. And when that URL and port is set, Internet Explorer 11 will send a post message to that URL and port, where IT can start to collect all the different reports from their organization of where enterprise mode is being used. So think of this kind of like crowdsourcing their line of business app testing. So they can see not only what line of business apps they have, but also which ones their users are using most often. The question? The feature, well, the post message, I've been calling it phone home. I don't know if there's an official name for it yet, but.
Yeah, this is, the question was, what is that feature name? And it's part of the, part of enterprise mode in providing a post back to a specified location. So the feature itself doesn't have a name. It's simply part of enterprise mode to be able to crowdsource information and be able to post it to a location of your choosing. And we'll walk through that.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the group policy. The group policy itself, it's kind of three configurations. There's on, off, and then on with a URL and port mentioned. All right, there's also another registry key. So it's great if you can go through and specify each line of business app individually one by one, but the thing is that takes time, and it involves each of your users finding the apps that require enterprise mode by themselves. And this can be really frustrating for the end user who just wants their web to work. So we also enable an XML site list, which you can think of as a whitelist of all of the sites that you know within your company that require enterprise mode to function properly. So this is the list of sites that IT knows require enterprise mode, and they can put this in an XML file and push it down to their machines, and the machine, well, they actually, you specify a file path for the site list, and the site list could be put locally, it could be on an internal server that your machines have access to, it could be on an external server, somewhere where your machines can access it. And this is where you can put the list of the URLs, and IE will know by looking at the reg key where it should go look for this site list. So let me dive in a little bit more on the whole site list concept, because just saying, oh, it's XML is kind of vague. One of the things that we heard loudest from our enterprise customers is that they don't have enough granularity of control over what they place in the different compatibility modes. So today, IT can put sites in IE7 compat mode by overriding the local CV list, which puts sites in IE7 compat view by default. And that is very heavy-handed, because not only are they limited to IE7 compat, they also are limited only to domains. There are no subdomains, there's no path. And I was talking to a gentleman earlier at the conference, actually, who was telling me about his enterprise's portal requires to be put in compatibility view in order to work. But one of the pages off of the portal, that's also a required line of business app to function, needs to be taken off of the compatibility view list in order to function. So it boggled my mind. People, in order to do their jobs, had to go in, click compatibility view, and then move on, and then click it off again, and that's a whole lot of switching back and forth. And the site list provides the granularity to specify not only domains and subdomains, but paths and subpaths as well. So you can see in the markup of the XML, you can include or exclude the main domains. And what this is saying is you can say, okay, I want everything under this domain to load in enterprise mode. This can often be if you have multiple line of business apps under the same domain. And then say one of them updates, and now it's HTML5 compliant and it's awesome. You can specify and say, okay, I want you to exclude this from enterprise mode. So set exclude equal true on the XML item. And that one path and everything under that path will not load in enterprise mode. It'll load in the default IE by default. So if you put the X-ray compatible meta tag for IE10 mode, it'll load in 10 mode instead of enterprise mode like everything else under that domain. We also are providing a tool which will be available through the IE Download Center in a couple of weeks to help you manage the site list. So I've had to edit XML before. I've also worked on the Microsoft compatibility view list, and let me tell you, if you typo in XML, especially when it gets to be hundreds of lines long, it can take you a while to find the problem. So we're providing a tool, calling it the Enterprise Mode Site List Manager, because it's catchy, to help you manage this and not have to worry about the XML at all. You can also see we have the rules version there as well. So what happens is IE will look for a change in the rules version about a minute after load, and then if we find a rules version change, we'll pull down the new version. So this is how you update it. You just say, okay, well, this is version 3. I want to add some sites and remove some sites because we made some changes and we found some new sites that needed to be put in enterprise mode. So I'm going to release rules version 4 on my server where I'm hosting this. And then the next time my managed machines go to look, we'll just automatically pull down the new list and start using that. So Fred mentioned testing, and so this is where the phone home feature becomes really useful. So you can, one of the things IT came to us and said during the pilot was, do you know what we don't really know? We don't really know what sites we have. And IT oftentimes isn't responsible for the maintenance of all of their line of business apps. Oftentimes these apps were written by third parties where the contract has since expired, or worse, the company itself has gone under. So this website kind of exists in limbo where they need it to work, but nobody's really responsible for the maintenance of it. So there's not too much they can do besides put it in enterprise mode now. So what an enterprise IT guy can do when they're testing out what line of business apps they have, they can take some test app users and say, all right, you guys, I want you to go about your day and do your job. And every time you see an app that doesn't quite work or just doesn't work at all, I want you to turn on enterprise mode and go tools, enterprise mode, and see if that fixes it. If it does, awesome, just continue on your way. And if it doesn't, okay, just turn it right back off. And if they configure the phone home feature, then IT will just be able to use that to collect a list of all the different URLs that require enterprise mode. And once that they have this information, they can use that to populate their site list and push out a new updated version of the site list so that everybody in the company has the added benefits from the testing of a few users.
Yeah, one piece of feedback we got from some of the pilot customers was, what Nicole said, that, I may own the desktop, but I don't own all the line of business applications that my users own. This is one way to help them crowdsource that information, but one piece of feedback we got from one customer might turn into a best practice, and that's they actually set up a SharePoint site as a self-service portal for those line of business application owners. IT basically said, you know what, I don't own the line of business apps. I don't want to be involved in determining what's compatible and what's not. I'm going to set up a self-service portal so the line of business application owners can go in, test their own application. If they think enterprise mode works, great. They can add their name and the URL, and it'll auto-populate the XML list. So I think that's a great best practice. We'd like to find out more about how customers are using this kind of feature so that we can hopefully build more smarts into the tools.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Fred just reminded me of, is that the way we configured enterprise mode for this release is we left it open for enterprises to set it up in the way that's best for their own enterprise. Because if you look at the different enterprise deployments, if any of you have worked with more than one enterprise customer, you probably know that IT can be like night and day between companies. And for us, just talking between Microsoft IT and some of the other companies' IT, it's a totally different way of running things. So we tried to structure the solution in the way that would be the most extensible for the most number of enterprises. And we're still collecting different feedback on what works and what doesn't work so well and what we can look at and improve on later.
Yeah, since we're using group policy, obviously you can configure different XML lists for different divisions or different locations. It's completely up to you how you manage that.
Yeah. And we're also exploring how to get this onto bring your own device type scenarios. So overall, when you take all these tools and enterprise mode itself together, you have this excellent end-to-end experience for your end user. So you start off with your enterprise mode site list, which you set the location of via group policy, and that's pushed on to the managed machines. Then when your end user is surfing on the net, everything just appears to work, because under the covers, what's happening is IE 11 is switching out between default edge mode IE and enterprise mode as the site list dictates. And on the rare occasion where users find a site that their IT hasn't found yet, they can just go into the tools menu and select enterprise mode themselves. And with phone home enabled, IT gets the notification and they can add it to the list so all the users can benefit.
Yeah, I should mention here, this is a simplification, obviously. Enterprise mode and edge mode, those aren't the only two modes. To piggyback what I said earlier, we're not removing any of the existing document modes. We're not removing any of the existing compatibility tools that you use today. It's just our intention with this slide to show if you have a site that's been configured to run in enterprise mode, it's a seamless experience for the end user. One of the things that the pilot customers told us was, my end users shouldn't have to know anything. I don't want to have to train them. They should just go to a website, and if they hit a public-facing website, great, they're going to be using edge mode, modern standards. If they use an intranet site that uses compatibility view, it just works. If they use an intranet site or a web app that uses enterprise mode, it just works. So a seamless transition between all those.
Yeah. Yeah, so the question for the live cast is, does enterprise mode override edge mode in the web config? Yes, the answer is it does, because oftentimes edge mode might have been specified at a time when edge was IE9 or IE10, and it might have been some change that's happened since then that enterprise mode does fix, but the difference between when what edge was defined as when that app was written and what edge mode means today could be the difference between working and not working. And so in that case, enterprise mode is the one that wins out in this scenario.
One of the other principles that these pilot customers gave us was, I don't want to have to be able to crack open the website. Because in some cases, it may be a large line of business application, and frankly, my background is an IT pro. If something's working, you don't want to touch it, generally. So what they told us was, we want a solution that we can overlay on top of the existing compatibility tools that are available and turn a site into enterprise mode if we need to. Yeah, there was a hand over there. Yeah.
So as a site developer, do you know if you've been put into that mode? You don't unless IT has informed you. But if your site if you write your site to work in IE11, then I don't see why you'd have to worry about that. This mode is specifically for the sites that are broken. And these are often the ones that were written, 4 or 5, maybe 5+ years ago, that need to be put in this mode, that already run in 5, 7, 8 doc mode in order to function in early versions of IE today.
Yeah, IT is generally a cost center, right? So even within Microsoft, we have applications that were written 10, 12 years ago for doing very specific functions within the organization. So if something's working, it doesn't break until now when they test it with IE11 for user agent string issues, or maybe because of ActiveX binary issues, there may be problems with those web apps. So this is meant as kind of a temporary remediation while those sites get up to date with modern standards.
Yeah, this shouldn't be something that you fear as a web developer. You should think of it as the way to get your enterprise off of using IE8 so you can start to focus on the standards in the new web apps you write.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, the question is, do we also override the response header? Yes, we do.
Just to clarify that point though, if there's an XUA compatible meta tag that specifies IE7 or specifies, for example, IE5 quirks mode, it should be mentioned that this is IE11 emulating IE8, and IE8 was our first browser that included compatibility view. So in IE11 emulating IE8, it will still run in IE7 or quirks mode.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are some sites that rely on quirks mode, IE5 quirks mode, or IE7 document view, this compatibility view, that now run better in enterprise mode because of some of the tweaks that we've made. And certainly performance is a factor. Even if a site works properly in compatibility view, you may want to just look at it in enterprise mode.
All right, so this is awesome, and now I want to show you a demo. So I'm going to go move over here to my demo machine and show you my mock-up of a travel site. Now, you might have seen, this might be familiar to many of you, where it's telling me that I need to update to the latest version of Internet Explorer. Now, clearly they're doing some UA string sniffing here, and that's not so great. So let me open up my F12 tools and give myself an older dock mode. All right, so dock mode 8 fixes it, so I guess my site was looking for the MSIE tag. But these buttons, I could cancel tickets, but I don't know what the other button says. So let me go in and inspect element, and oh dear, I see the problem. The problem is that I'm using CSS expressions to position these buttons, which means that I can't really see anything, and I can't really do anything either with the tools I have available to me right now. So let me close out of this, and let me see what enterprise mode does. So I put it in enterprise mode, it's great, my buttons are there, I can purchase my tickets, everything is fine and dandy. But not only that, so let me close that and show you something pretty excellent as well. So next time I go to my travel page, you can see that I load in enterprise mode again. And the way you can tell is the blue icon of buildings up in the URL bar. And the reason we added this is that we considered whether or not to actually give any visual indication that we were in enterprise mode. And we figured that the support guys would want to hang us up by our toes if we did not give them any indication where they could easily ask the user, hey, is there a little blue icon in the URL bar? And the user can go, oh, yeah, there is, or no, there isn't, should there be? And that way they can help troubleshoot a lot faster. So that is my demo, and there are some caveats that I want to mention really fast. This isn't a silver bullet. We mentioned we do not solve all cases, and there's some cases that we just cannot solve. And I want to spend a couple minutes on those to hopefully stimmy some questions about whether or not we fix this or we fix that. One of these is mixed mode pages. Oftentimes you'll have a hosted iframe, which is in one dock mode inside of a frame that's in another dock mode. So this is often like an IE8 mode frame within an edge mode document. And this enterprise mode does not work like you'd hope it would in this scenario due to the changes we made in IE9 on how we handle iframes. Some hard-coded ActiveX controls do OS version checks, which we do not spoof. So oftentimes this is for XP era ActiveX controls. They say, oh, are you Windows XP? And we'll go, no, we're not Windows XP. And in that case, the ActiveX control will fail. And finally, there's Windows font rendering. So Internet Explorer uses the system font rendering in order to render fonts. And there's not that much we can do about this. So for example, even IE8 between Windows XP and IE8 and Windows 7, font rendering is going to look a little different between the two. And obviously, IE8 on Windows XP versus IE11 on Windows 8.1, the font rendering is going to use the Windows 8.1 font rendering. So that being said,
yeah, I was going to say, Nicole is the developer side of this partnership. I'm the IT Pro side. So let me also show you a quick IT Pro demo that some of you may appreciate as you deploy this. So switching back, I've opened up regedit because the group policies that we have in place basically turn on registration keys or registry keys. And I'll show you a couple of tricks here. So the reg keys that we're creating are under in this case, HKeyLM or HKey local machine. You can also create these under user. But it's software policies, Microsoft Internet Explorer main enterprise mode. And for the pilot, I think we actually used a branch other than policies. We went straight to Microsoft. So I wanted to call that out specifically for some pilot customers who may be watching this webcast. HKeyLM, software policies, Microsoft Internet Explorer, main enterprise mode. There are basically two keys here that I've got. Both of these are strings. One is simply enable. And as Nicole mentioned earlier, if this enable key exists, then the user will be able to choose enterprise mode from the tools menu. Now, something to keep in mind is you don't have to have correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't have to have the enable key in place. You could just have the file list.
right.
In other words, you can prevent users from getting themselves into trouble by turning on enterprise mode manually.
Yeah, just to kind of add to this, just to frame why a company might actually want a setup like this. They might have a very small number of older line of business apps that they know exactly which ones they have because there aren't that many. And they know what they need to have to work, and they don't want their users to maybe shoot themselves in the foot by saying, oh, gee, what does this do? And they click and they're like, oh, it's broken. Why is it broken? I'm sad. And then they call up support and say, my site's broken. Can you fix it? Like, I don't understand why I can't do my job because this website is broken because they put it into enterprise mode, which you would be surprised at the number of people who do that today with the local compatibility view list. So this is something that we've seen coming, which is why we separated these two keys out. So IT might decide, okay, well, we know the list, we know we've tested everything, so we're just going to deploy the site list and not even let users know that there's an enterprise mode option. And to the end user, they'll just go about their day browsing, and everything should just work.
And then obviously the other key is the site list. And as Nicole mentioned, it can be on the local machine, it can be on the intranet, extranet, wherever you choose. The enable registry key does double duty. As she mentioned earlier, you can configure this with a site, a valid URL, and a port number. So that if a user does turn on or off enterprise mode, it'll simply send that post message and what they're calling the phone home feature, or simply posting that to a given location. Now, just to be clear, this is not going to Microsoft. It's completely up to you how you configure it and whether or not you choose to use this feature.
Yeah, we don't get any of the data for this. Yeah, it's just for IT's benefit to help them manage their own websites.
Question back there, yes.
Yeah, so the question is, when do we download the new version in the whole process of browsing? So what happens is on launch, about a little over a minute after launch, IE will look at the location specified in the registry for a new version of the file. So elsewhere in the registry, we store a current version key, which is the current version of the site list that we have downloaded. So we download a local copy and cache it. And if the version numbers are different, then we download the one from the server again, and then we just keep using that local cached copy on every navigate. So on navigate, we'll go, okay, is this on the list? If yes, then we'll load in enterprise mode. If no, we won't. Another question that we get often for this is, what happens if I leave my corporate network where my site list is hosted? Will I still be able to use the site list? In this case, yes, you can, because we have that local cached copy. If we don't have access to the URL or the location where the site list is stored, then the query just fails, and it fails gracefully.
So while you were giving that answer, I brought up the registry key that holds that value. So we have version control on the XML file. It uses the locally cached copy unless there's a difference, a delta, and then it'll pull down the copy. Now in testing, Nicole tells me that they've tested up to 7,500 sites or so?
Yeah, about 8K.
We have one customer who tried adding all 18,000 sites in their intranet into this location, and they said, yes, it does work, but obviously it takes additional time. What we're suggesting is that enterprise mode should be thought of as the solution for the applications for which compatibility view doesn't work, not that you should turn everything on your intranet into enterprise mode. As a matter of fact, there is no wildcard in the XML file. You can't simply say, I want to surf the web using this mode. I don't want, I can't run my intranet in enterprise mode. Do you want me to talk about the security ramifications of that for a second?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. I see a couple hands. We'll get to you in just a second. Let me finish this thought here. So I do get the questions, why can't I surf the web in enterprise mode? Why can't I hit public-facing websites in enterprise mode? And sometimes as a related question, why can't, as a developer, I explicitly ask for enterprise mode as an XUA-compatible meta tag? And I think the answers are related. As many of you know, Internet Explorer 11 is much more secure than previous versions of our browser. As a matter of fact, NSS Labs just on Monday published an update to their socially engineered malware study. They studied a lot of the top browsers. They found IE11 had a 99.9% block rate against socially engineered malware. Now, they've done this study for a number of years, and I have to say we weren't as good back in IE8. I think for IE8 we were around 70 or 80 percentile. So we have made significant security improvements in the browser since IE8. Since we're running IE11 emulating IE8, the last thing we want to do is enable end users to be able to go out to the internet at large in enterprise mode and perhaps open themselves up to the same kind of drive-by exploit that would affect IE8 today. You may have seen just a couple weeks ago, Microsoft patched a zero-day exploit that was applicable to IE8, did not apply to IE11. We've made a lot of improvements in the browser. We don't want users to use IE11 in enterprise mode and suddenly reduce their security down to IE8 levels. That's also the same reason we didn't want to enable this through XUA compatible meta tags. The last thing we wanted to do was enable some website out there to add an XUA compatible meta tag and an IE8 drive-by exploit and perhaps try to take advantage of some of that functionality if you went into enterprise mode. Now, certainly we're not aware of specific vulnerabilities that might translate to exploits. We just didn't want to take that risk. Yeah, there were a couple hands. Yes, sir.
Does it work in 64 and 32-bit IE? Yes, it does.
Yeah, another hand?
Yeah, it's saved as a cache container, not a temporary file. Yeah, question. Enterprise mode is available in the Windows 8.1 update and also the update to IE11 for Windows 7, which I believe is going live on next Tuesday. I don't know if it's available today, probably through MSDN, for the MSDN subscription.
It is available today as part of the Windows 8.1 update to MSDN subscribers. It will be made available next week, starting through Windows Update and through Microsoft Downloads. Now, just to be clear, Enterprise mode is being offered as an update for IE11 on all SKUs. So it's available on Internet Explorer 11 on Windows 8.1, Windows 7, Windows 2008 R2 Service Pack 1, Windows Server 2012 R2, and it will be available to a certain degree on Windows RT, Windows 8.1 RT, but I should explain there. Do you want me to handle that one?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so on Windows RT, obviously you can't run x86 binaries. And from talking with a lot of our enterprise customers, ActiveX controls and other x86 binaries were a big piece of the compatibility puzzle that they needed to solve. So although we're enabling enterprise mode on Windows RT, it will only fix issues like the user agent string and bringing back CSS expressions and fast tab switching. It doesn't solve the problem that they still can't run Java. They still can't run ActiveX controls and so on. So it only fixes part of the problem. We're not suggesting that enterprise mode is a great solution necessarily for Windows RT, but certainly your mileage may vary. It depends. We had one customer who tried it and it worked and they were happy, but we're suggesting that it's really a solution intended for Windows 8.1 and Windows 7 primarily.
For, like all compatibility issues, it really depends on how it was implemented and what specific problem you're seeing. For the most part, for x86 or x64 systems, enterprise mode is great. It does what it says on the box. For RT and ARM-based hardware, it gets to be a little different because it really depends on what the problem is. We can't change the system architecture with enterprise mode. It doesn't work.
Right.
So with that note, I'll pass it off to Fred to tell you some more of the great things about enterprise mode.
So in upgrading to IE11, you're getting a lot of benefits here, and I wanted to talk specifically about increased performance. Obviously, you're getting increased web standards, HTML5, CSS3, WebGL. We made some announcements just this week about increasing our support for WebGL. And I should also recommend that you go to the site, I think it's status.modern.ie. This will actually give you a roadmap of all of the supported standards for Internet Explorer. So it's an exciting step forward in terms of transparency and making ourselves available to the developer community. There's also additional security. I mentioned the NSS Labs report. There's lots of goodness associated with modern versions of Internet Explorer 11. We've added, for example, for 64-bit machines, we now have high entropy address space layout randomization, which means there's over a terabyte of addressable memory where processes could potentially run. So we're trying to avoid with that heap spraying attacks, or at least make heap spraying attacks much, much, much more difficult to accomplish. So there's lots of goodness associated with IE11. The last one is reliability. We obviously are continuing to make a more reliable browser. I think for enterprise mode in particular, though, performance is worth mentioning. Now, performance is a very complex area. There's page load times, there's JavaScript times, there's graphics rendering, there's text rendering. We're not suggesting that any one benchmark captures real-world performance. We really think that customers should try Internet Explorer on their own and decide if it works for your web applications. But in looking at some specific benchmarks, obviously IE11 is going to be faster than IE8. And what we're finding now is IE11 running in enterprise mode loads IE8 web apps twice as fast. The JavaScript performance, the text rendering, and even the graphics rendering is all going to be faster because in IE9 we started to introduce hardware acceleration. So one big change, besides completely rewritten JavaScript engine, what we call our Chakra engine, besides a completely new graphics rendering engine, text rendering engine, it's all hardware and GPU accelerated. So even running in enterprise mode, you still get a lot of that IE11 goodness. And some of our pilot customers who were testing this said, yes, their applications do seem to run a lot faster. Obviously, the biggest benefit, though, of upgrading to Internet Explorer 11 is that it really opens up companies to the next generation of technology. We're trying to help you get off of the old stuff. We're trying to help you get onto modern platforms, modern services, modern devices. So I think there's a lot of benefit associated with this. Now, I've talked about the pilot briefly. I can share some details here. We started a pilot in October of last year with just a few customers who had identified web apps as the blocker for upgrading to Windows 8.1. They were trying to upgrade to Windows 8.1, and what they found was there were those few IE8 applications that were holding them back. Anybody in a similar position? Yeah, I'm seeing a few hands. So yes, we started adding people to the pilot, and we actually we had a target of 30 customers. We ended up within the pilot with more than 90 customers because this was of a lot of interest to companies. Lots of companies across different industries, across different countries, but I also don't want to misrepresent this. Enterprise mode is not a panacea. Enterprise mode won't solve all problems. As Nicole mentioned, there are some exceptions, some specific technical exceptions, but also there's a long, long, long tail of web apps that folks have created over the last 10, 15 years. We did solve the majority of problems for the majority of customers, but we are still taking feedback. And I think the significant portion there is Microsoft is making an ongoing commitment to enterprise customers to help you stay up to date. With the release that we announced this week, it's a relatively small release for IE11, but there's a lot of goodness associated with it. And I think the reason we're releasing this, enterprise mode will be pushed out to all customers. It's turned off by default. It's not going to break stuff. Enterprise mode being pushed out to every customer using IE11 provides a lot of goodness. The WebGL standards that we added to IE11 add a lot of goodness. The F12 developer tools, some of the modifications there add goodness. What we're suggesting is you don't necessarily have to start testing IE11 all over again to stay up to date. So this is really an ongoing investment on Microsoft's part to help customers stay up to date, to reduce the costs that it takes to stay up to date, but also continue to provide a lot of value and benefit. All right, we contracted with Forrester Consulting to go and talk with some of those customers. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just, some of the pilot customers weren't just blowing smoke, basically. I really wanted candid feedback from those customers on whether or not this was a good solution for them. And preliminary feedback tends to indicate that it is. Forrester says they want to wait until those customers have actually deployed live production code until they release their final report, and we'll make that available to you likely this summer. But in the meantime, they did produce a preliminary report that says IE11 is much easier than previous upgrades. It says that their testing and deployment efforts are significantly reduced. Operational support takes less effort, productivity is improved. One customer gave them a quote and said, enterprise mode is anticipated to save them millions of dollars in support costs worldwide. So we'd love to, as you start to get your own experience with this, we'd love to get your feedback on this as well. Again, I don't want to paint too rosy a picture. It doesn't solve all issues, but if it does solve your issues, I'd like to know. And likewise, if it doesn't solve your issues, we'd like to know because we'd like to continue making the product better. So our guidance to developers. Encourage your customers and employers to upgrade to the latest version of Internet Explorer. There's a lot of benefits in terms of modern standard support, increased reliability, better security, better performance, and now better backward compatibility in IE11. You shouldn't have to worry about Internet Explorer 8 anymore. Help us kill that. You may be familiar with the IE6 countdown site. IE6countdown.com shows worldwide how much IE6 is still being used out there. I think it's a little early to suggest we set up something like that for IE8, but that's the direction we're taking. We'd love to help our customers move to the latest version of Internet Explorer and help developers by making sure that everybody is on modern standards. Writing to modern standards as a best practice means you shouldn't have to worry about the specific browser version. You shouldn't have to worry about the device necessarily. You shouldn't have to worry about which browser is being used. So I think there's a lot of goodness here. I'd love your feedback on it as we continue to do this. Some resources for you. For IT pros, obviously we have TechNet. technet.microsoft.com/IE should forward to the appropriate page in your country. We also have developers, msdn.microsoft.com/IE. You can also look up the IE blog. If you simply do a search on IE space blog, you can find the latest blog entry that shows enterprise mode in some detail. All right, any other questions? I do want to be respectful of your time, but we do have a few more giveaways, and I know there are probably some questions brewing. Yeah, if you don't mind using the microphones for these, that way we don't have to repeat the questions and we can get through them pretty quickly.
And while everybody's lining up at the mics, I just want to add that if you're looking for the documentation on enterprise mode, you'll be able to find it at TechNet.
So I know you're not looking for a testimonial, but as one of the customers that did test this, I think we got involved at around the prototype 2 timeframe, so we weren't one of those first 30. We had been trying and failing to deploy IE10 for well over a year, hit many, many blockers, even though we had it set for intranet sites to be in compatibility mode. Every one of those that we've hit so far, this fixes.
That's fantastic.
That is excellent. Thank you so much.
I think you guys nailed it. Excellent work.
I don't know this gentleman, and I didn't give him a bribe, so, but I'm happy to now.
I want to take that back to the engineering team as well, just to
By the way, anybody
let
ask
them
a question, we do have a few
well.
more giveaways left. So,
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So there is a site list where we can keep track of all the sites in the enterprise intranet sites.
Correct.
So is there any PowerShell command which IT operations staff can use to directly update it or enable or disable registry keys?
So, sorry, could you repeat the first part of the question?
My question is, are there any PowerShell commands to do for the administrators instead of manually doing it?
Right, we don't have that yet. So when we were getting this off the ground, the highest priority for us was to give enterprises something that they could go and hit their ground running. And like Fred mentioned earlier, this is something we're committed to. So we might not have had the time to put together the full, like, very polished tools to publish everything out, but that was because we really wanted to land the core functionality.
Yeah, also anticipating a question that some of you may have, we are updating our ADM and ADMX files to include these group policies. So I know some folks have had trouble finding it. If you go to a machine where you've already installed IE11 on a server, for example, you'll find some of those files available.
Yeah.
Another question? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask what's the difference between the F12 tools and the new enterprise mode. Is it really completely new development, or is it just built upon those?
For the F12 tools?
Yes.
So there's no difference in the F12 developer tools between IE11 and IE11 with enterprise mode. In fact, one of the high order bits while developing enterprise mode is we did not want to break F12.
No, I think you didn't get me right.
Okay.
In F12 tools, you can set a specific compatibility mode.
Right.
And I wanted to ask if this compatibility mode is related to the new enterprise mode. Is it built upon it, or is it a new development?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, actually. So when you have the enable registry key set, you will get an extra option in the browser profile dropdown for enterprise mode. So if you want to do your testing to see, okay, if you're looking at an older web app and you want to see if enterprise mode will fix it without committing it to your local site list, you can set it in the browser mode or the browser profile dropdown.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, was about the F12 tools.
Okay.
One of the themes of this build seems like the tooling and the performance stuff. And I was just curious, in your slide you showed that there was a kind of a performance hit for their enterprise mode. Is that going to show up in the tooling if I were to trace it with like App Insights or one of the other?
I would think it would. I think it might be worth noting that, well, I'm actually not too sure why the SunSpider is slower. It could have to do with what we're doing with JavaScript on the covers. But
I would some of the depreciated methods you guys brought back.
Right, it could very well be. I don't know the specifics. I would assume that yes, we would pick up on these reasons for any sort of profiling. I haven't run it myself personally, but I would assume so.
But all the F12 tools, as far as memory profiling and all the other stuff,
it should still work.
Yeah, everything should still work in F12 developer tools in enterprise mode. But full disclosure on the SunSpider results, obviously you can't have IE8 and IE11 installed on the same machine. But what I did stand up was 2 virtual machines on a server, each with Windows 7, 2 dedicated CPUs, and 2 gigs of RAM. And I ran them independently. I ran them multiple times and then averaged the tests. So, do your own tests, look at this performance yourself, but it was pretty marked improvement from what I saw.
Yeah, I do want to add to that because I worked on the F12 tools during Windows 8 and the original IE11 development. You will see some of the differences that you will normally encounter in the differences between IE8 and IE9 dock mode. Most notably, the live DOM will be gone, and that has to do with how the page is rendered. This would happen with enterprise mode or without enterprise mode. So just don't be caught off guard if it happens and you're like, why is my DOM not live? And it's because you're in an older dock mode and it won't be live because we don't have that functionality.
Is the compatibility mode a superset of, the enterprise mode a superset of the compatibility modes? So if I turn on enterprise mode, can I turn off, can I remove the agent string?
No, you
or
can't.
The compatibility string inside the
A
header?
little bit. This is a complicated response because if you're using the XUA compatible meta tag to specify IE7, for example, you could run enterprise mode, which is IE8 emulation, which includes compatibility view. So you'll essentially be running IE11 as IE8 as IE7 in that scenario. So it's not to say you necessarily need to remove the XUA compatible meta tag, although enterprise mode can sit on top of that as an additional layer.
So that implies that IE11 runs a different compatibility mode than IE8, is that right?
Slightly different in that we're making the changes that we suggested earlier. We're making sure that the user agent string, for example, is an exact replica of the original IE8. ActiveX controls are being told that it's IE8 for the first time. In document mode, just running an IE8 document mode, we weren't telling the ActiveX controls anything different. We're also bringing back some of that functionality, as Nicole showed during your demo. CSS expressions, even if you're running in IE8 document mode, we didn't have that function available. So this is why enterprise mode, think of enterprise mode as a better emulation for Internet Explorer 8.
So it's really the difference between compatibility mode and IE8.
Right.
So my question is related to the phone home capability. You mentioned that you put the URL and port number information in there. Where is it documented as far as what you're getting there and how you should process or whatnot? Is that in
It-
MSDN? Or?
Yeah, it's at TechNet. The TechNet documentation, I believe, has a sample of what the phone home string looks like. I didn't have time to set it up today to show you, but I think it's URL equals whatever the URL is, and enterprise mode equals either on or off. So you can just take those post messages and forward them and process them however you want to extract that information, basically.
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
Say our enterprise decides to try this and we run into one of those errors with it in one of our web apps. What's the support model like? Do you guys work with enterprises to help resolve those minority issues?
I think that depends. Well, Fred, do you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have Premier support today, for example, I'm stepping away from the speaker a little more. If you have Premier support today, what we're suggesting is you can open a ticket if there are problems with enterprise mode that didn't exist in IE8. Now, sometimes the response may be, yes, we're aware of that. If there's a mixed mode page, for example, one customer in Japan ran into this problem where they were in the process of upgrading their portal software. They had a very new portal running very old applications. And of course, enterprise mode renders the entire page in enterprise mode, but it can't render a portion of the page in enterprise mode and a portion of the page in modern standards. So for support, we obviously don't want customers to have to file support tickets with their line of business application vendor and with Microsoft. We are working closely with most of the major line of business application vendors to make sure that this does work in their software moving forward.
Question?
How does this work with the IE frame? Because we have a site that has the IE frame that looks at all the page. Sorry, IE frame? Yeah, we have a one site where it's a more network IE web app, but we had a page that is needed in IE8, so we had to put the IE frame inside that.
Yeah, that's the scenario I was just mentioning. I think what you're talking about is you have a web page that's in modern standards, but there's a particular frame, an iframe, that is rendering an IE8 web app.
We have to use ActiveX to do some rendering, and then we use that.
That's a problem that we have architecturally, I think, because within, we can either render the entire page using enterprise mode, or we can render the entire page using modern standards. It's worth trying, though, because we're not actually, when we switch to enterprise mode, we're not, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not necessarily turning off everything that IE11 offers.
No, we're actually just turning off a very small subset. We wanted to go as minimalistic as possible with the things we turned off, just to see what's the minimum required to turn off to make it work. And the answer is not that much.
It's worth testing, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, first of all, thanks for all your work on this. It sounds like it's going to solve some headaches, hopefully.
Hopefully.
My question is kind of more on the user end. Let's say we have the XML file out there for users to reference, and someone calls me and says, this site's not rendering. We found a site, a user finds a site that doesn't work inside the organization. So I go into the XML and I add that site. What kind of instructions do I need to give the user? Do they need to restart their browser simply, or just wait? Like you said something about wait a minute or two? Or?
So it depends on how they let you know. So if they just call you up without doing anything to their own machine and say, hey, I found the site that's broken, like what do I do? And you update the XML and push that out, just once they restart their browser, they should pick up the new XML file. If they set it through their local site list and you get the notification through Phone Home, then you get that notification through Phone Home and can push it out and they already have it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. Sorry?
No, there was a question about phone. Sorry, internally, that's what engineering has been using to talk about the post feature that notifies the central location. It's a setting that's within group policy or the registry key. You can set it either place. I also get the question, I'll anticipate maybe one or two questions here. How do we do this? Okay, this is great for domain joined machines. How do I enable enterprise mode for non-domain joined machines? You can enable it by simply adding those registry keys. So there are a couple of workarounds today. We're working on being able to offer this as a bring your own device solution. But temporarily, we do have customers who are trying this by suggesting that if you at least have local administrative privileges, you can simply install the registry key. So you can publish out to those users, here's the registry key that adds the list, and here's the registry key that removes the list, and it's relatively simple. The other thing that customers can do today is use the IEAK. The Internet Explorer Administration Kit can be used to create a customized version of IE11 that includes those registry keys. So you can have your own branded version of Internet Explorer. And the specific scenario that we're running into there is we had some pilot customers who say, excuse me, who told us, we don't have a lot of employees, but we have hundreds of thousands of independent agents. And those people can use whatever hardware they want. If they happen to be using a machine that supports IE11, like Windows 7 or Windows 8.1, we'd love to be able to push this change out to them. So they can create their own branded version of Internet Explorer 11 that includes these changes and simply say, if you're one of our independent agents, here is a feature that you can now add that simply turns on those, makes those changes and adds those registry settings. Now, obviously, longer term, I think the right solution is to use OMA-DM or something else to be able to use mobile device management. Most of the pilot customers I talked to said OMA what? I think it may be early for some customers, which is why we're suggesting that there is a viable workaround that you can use today. Any other questions? I'm out of giveaways, by the way, so the questions may drop at this point.
Yeah, just one question. IE also influences some client applications like Office when you open documents from website, SharePoint, and stuff like that, or even maybe another scenario, but some applications, they embed the IE web page inside of their own.
Right, yeah.
So does this influence those scenarios?
Right, so one interesting thing is about hosted IE content. Typically, it's like hosted web apps for the desktop. The interesting thing is that for those types of applications, we default to IE7 compatibility mode. And the app writer has to kind of jump through a bunch of hoops, actually, in order to get to the modern edge standard stuff. The answer to the question that you're asking specifically is enterprise mode is only applicable to desktop IE. So hosted web content in Office or you name it, is not affected.
Even if it's not hosted, let's say opening a document from SharePoint,
right.
It's different when people have installed IE11 than IE8. I mean, like security prompts, stuff like that. Does this will influence these kinds of workflows?
It will if you're opening the SharePoint documents within IE the browser. Yeah. Okay.
Good question.
Yep.
So you guys have been talking about keeping up on this as an ongoing thing. Are you saying this is a permanent feature of new versions of Internet Explorer moving forward? Can we count on this being there?
Let's put it this way. We know that the current support model suggests that IE8 is available for Windows 7 customers until 2020. There are a lot of enterprise customers who may have created their enterprise software roadmap based on the assumption they can stay on IE8 until 2020. We're trying to help them move up to the latest version of Internet Explorer and provide enterprise mode as an answer to some of those apps having a longer life cycle. So I don't think we're in a position to say today anything about permanency. Permanency can last a long time. Sure. But certainly the specific problem we're trying to solve is that enterprise customers have created software lifecycle roadmaps based on the assumption that Internet Explorer 8 is going to be available to them until 2020, and they should be able to use that until 2020. So what we're trying to do with that is say, no, you don't have to stay on IE8. There's a lot of goodness associated with upgrading to the latest browser. Let's help you upgrade and get you up to the latest modern standard by providing better backward compatibility for IE8. Does that answer your question?
It sort of does. Obviously, you guys are on accelerated. IE comes out every year now, and I'm just wondering, when the next version comes out, are we going to be stuck staying on IE11?
It's our intent to make it as easy as possible for customers to continue to stay on the latest version of Internet Explorer by reducing the upgrade costs and providing better backward compatibility.
Yeah, it wouldn't really make sense. So the purpose of enterprise mode is to make it easier to upgrade. It wouldn't make sense if in IE12 suddenly it becomes harder because you took advantage of enterprise mode in order to upgrade from IE8 to begin with.
Or whatever the next version of
or
Internet
what have
Explorer
you.
is.
Not that you're announcing it.
IEV next, whenever that happens, that it's something that we keep in mind when we're developing.
Yeah, so providing, that's why I say as a blanket statement, providing better backward compatibility and providing the best of modern standards is the direction that we're taking moving forward.
Yeah.
And IE8 is the ongoing target for that?
Yeah, this is not, to be clear, this is not a moving target. There was one slide I cut from this deck that actually showed enterprise customers have a lot of older applications based on IE8 and previous, and then they have a lot of modern applications. This is not a moving target where next year's version of enterprise mode will be targeting IE9. This is a static target. This is firmly focused on providing compatibility for IE8 and previous while we continue to evolve modern standards. There's a reason that modern web apps, HTML5, CSS3, don't break when you take updates to browsers. It's the old stuff that's breaking, and that's the specific enterprise problem that we're targeting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
All right. Thanks,
All right,
everyone.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Please don't forget to fill out your surveys. The reason we can come and present content like this is because you tell us it matters. So if it does matter, please let us know.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.